I will talk about a project that started for 2 years ago. It's a SI, Arctic Strategic Institute program, actually. It means that we are taking a small step out of our comfort zone and challenging ourselves on things that we are not that strong into. So, one work package in this whole project was about ecosystem approach to management in the Arctic, and I chose to call that from definition to action. I have had two great teachers, so that is Lis Jorgensen and it is Phil Mundy, and thank you for teaching me on this. It hasn't been easy. My God. It isn't. And it is like jumping in a very, very deep ocean, and you're sinking and sinking and sinking and sinking, and suddenly you can't keep your breath anymore. And you're swimming up to the surface again, breaking it and saying, wow, that was a lot of knowledge. And then you have to decide where to go, and you don't change your direction from then on, even though what other people are telling you. So, the definition, you already got it several times. I do not want to dive into that one. The steps, you already got it. I don't want to dive into that one again. So jumping right into the project and the overarching ecosystem objectives. Again, we said sustainable use of a rich and clean changing Arctic Ocean. I mean, you can put whatever under this umbrella, but at least I've introduced the ecosystem objective. There are two pillars that is keeping this up. That is the knowledge about the dynamic ecosystem, but it's also know how the human activity impacts the ecosystem. And then there's something about the critical level, from where we have to take the actions. You have to know about this critical actions level from these two pillars. So knowing about what critical level you're putting into this system, you can perform this sub-regional integrated ecosystem assessment. And then you can go to the step of giving this advice to the manager, capable to reduce or increase human activities. At least this is how we decided to put it up. So the area, defining the area. This is inside the Barents Sea large marine ecosystem, number 5, but it's specifically north of Svalbard. So there, north of Svalbard, you see the warm Atlantic current pumping heat and production into the Arctic Ocean. So that is the area. We also know that this is the area of the planet that is increasing at the most in temperature. It is the place where the ice age go back and forth depending on season. And it's also an increase in the pH. Yes. And behind all this, we have this breadth of the ecosystem, the natural fluctuation, the dynamic system. And you have to know when it's coming up and when it's coming down. You have to have this knowledge about your ecosystem. And then you have to add all your human activity inside this fluctuating dynamic ecosystem that is drifting in a certain way because of climate change. So how do you know when you can have a productive time period where you can fish a lot? And then when do you know when you have a low product period where you can fish low fishing effort? At least you will need to have critical values within both situations. So things are very dynamic from the data on what critical level you have, and also the adjustment all the way through this natural fluctuation, the drifting because of the temperature, and the footprints from the human activities. So, after have been defining this area and looking into the ecosystem, we need to, the step 1, to build up this monitoring program, grabbing these parts of the ecosystem that is telling us something about human impact, and the dynamic of the ecosystem. We have to define the human activity happening now, but also happening in the future, because this is the area where we see the commercial fish stocks expanding out. So if that will establish a future fishing in this area, we also have to take that into account. And then we have to look into the integrated assessment, this step 3. And inside this integrated assessment, where we look at the whole ecosystem simultaneously, we need to have this idea about what is a good health and what is a critical state, this dynamic critical state that we are talking about. And then the communication. How do we communicate this? Are we going to produce yet another report? Or are we going to do something different? Are we, for example, taking the approach of the weather forecast that we see every evening? Maybe we make an ecosystem forecast instead and make all this kind of knowledge a kind of the human properties. Everybody knows about the ecosystem. But ladies and gentlemen, the Atlantic water has now drifted very far into the Barents Sea. The cod stock has moved after this and actually entered the Lotte hearing area. And the fisherman is hunting after them, but we need to go in this area because the blue whale is now feeding in that. I mean, speaking this out to people in a daily basis or a monthly basis or something like that, and making it to that teaching, making it a natural part of living life. Maybe that's what we can do. I have just one problem. I don't know where to start. You can maybe help me by that. And then the management support, if that is necessary, the direct communication with the managers. So we have been on 2 cruises, one in 2014, one in 2015. Our northward expansion is limited by the ice. So this is our route that we made these 2 years. And we have looked into several components of this ecosystem. So we have looked into the water environment. We have tracked in this bubble, this bubble up there. The transect, we have tracked the Atlantic warm water that is pumping a lot of heat and production inside the Arctic Basin. We have also, with acoustics, identified a surface layer. The upper part of the surface layer for 0, yes, thank you, to 50 meters. We have 0 groups, redfish or sebastis, copperpods, amphipods, and krill. Then if you dive down close to the continental shelf at 300 to 500 meters, we have these large pots, haddock, redfish, and so on. And if you jump down to the next panel, looking offshore at 400 meters, you have the mesopelagic micronecton offshore. So this is the mesopelagic layer where we might find this commercial stock of cod or other pelagic fish as uri, sebastis, that is feeding its way out in the Arctic, if there's food enough. If we are looking, we try to identify where are the cod. Do we find it out in the Arctic Basin? Because it's actually a demersal fish, so it needs a seabed. So do we find it above 4,000 meters depth in the basin? And we actually see, so if you're pointing to the west, above the shelf and deep water, yes. So for this transect, you see that we find the cod above the shelf and above the deep waters. But if we identify the cod in this transect, we only find it above the shelf. We don't know why, but you just see it has some different distribution patterns. So do the cod have the potential to spread out in the Arctic Ocean? That is still a little bit challenge questions. But if we look at the total cod population in the Barents Sea, we see there's a pretty large population up there north of Svalbard. What we also identified was whale observations, and what was very nice to see, 17 blue whales during 24 hours feeding up in the ice. That was amazing. That was a very, very nice result that we got. And then we have a lot of other species that you know more about than me, distributed, and that was pretty much mammals in the ice edge up there. So it is very important feeding grounds for these animals that we have to take into consideration when moving around in these areas. What we also see if we look at the seabed, the benthos, that if we look at the communities and divide them up into what type of species is living together, we have a green community in the fjords, then we have a yellow community, we call the shelf, and we have a deeper community on the slope. So that is actually the animals, these who are deepest are those who are large and upraised, while those who are on the shallow up in the fjords is more flat, small species that we probably many of you know. Then we have the seabird observations too. We see where they are in relation to the cruise track that we made, and we also see that's a different species, and we need to take that into considerations too when they are nesting, when they are feeding. How do human activities fit into that one? What we also did was we looked into the stomachs of fish. We tried to ask ourselves who eat who. That is a very important component of the ecosystem understanding in this area. And we also collected tremendous amounts of isotope, biological material for stable isotope analysis to try to see in the entire ecosystem from the top to the bottom how it is linked, the benthic pelagic linking in this area. So, trying to come down to a doable project that is to be made within this 4 years that we have, we scope it down to look only at the fisheries impact on the target population, cod, sebastis, Greenland halibut, and other commercial fish species. We are trying to evaluate when we take these population out, how does the effect cascade out in the ecosystem, and I pushed in how does bottom trawling affect the benthos biodiversity, and you heard about how we are doing that. So the goal for this ecosystem-based management working package is that we like to give advice in space and in time in order to manage the whole ecosystem from benthos, zooplankton, fish, mammals, and seabirds as a consequence of fishing. We know there's multiple impacts, but we will not be able to do all these things within this framework that we have. So I think it's a great step just to take this one and start with that. So the next step for us will be that we're going to cruise the 3rd of September, that's 2 weeks from now, and we will go up in the ice again, follow it as far north as we can, and we will continue the baseline investigation. We will also sample harp seals, look into seal populations, and we will extend the sampling into the marginal ice zone as far as we can, and see if we can get out in the deeper basins, and we need to see if we can collect these commercial fish species. And of course, get more data so we can evaluate from 2014, 15 up to 2018 how the data changed. So that was Yeah.